Heal Your Shit is a podcast for anyone curious about why life throws us curveballs. We're all about digging into the connections between mind, body, and soul, but we keep it real. Because, let's be honest, being human can be one wild ride. Once you understand your shit, healing it becomes a whole lot easier. Hi, welcome to Heal Your Shit podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Laura.
And I'm Olaf. So for me, I went to a space in my life where it was so much suffering that I just couldn't bear with it. So I basically had to choose between becoming a bitter old man or start healing my shit. So for me, that path went through a lot of different modalities, but what I work mostly with today is de-armoring and IFS and inner child healing in different ways. So I have sessions with couples or individual sessions, and I also hold workshops.
And I'm Laura, and I started this journey, I guess, because of my depression, and I worked through it. And thanks to that, I have a lot of insight. I became a coach, a trauma-informed coach. So I help people to spot traumas in their life and work deeper elsewhere, maybe during de-armoring with you. So that's me. Welcome to our show.
Go.
It's on.
Welcome, everybody.
Welcome to our third episode of Heal Your Shit. And today we're going to talk about coping mechanisms.
Oh, yeah, we are.
Let's bring it on. Let's start with what it actually is. And if we look up the definition of coping mechanism, we find that it is a kind of response to a stress-related event or even trauma. So that can be something positive or something negative. It doesn't matter because you can get stressed about something good like a wedding or buying a house, right? And still your body might produce cortisol, which kicks in. That means stress. There's adrenaline, and even if it's good, you might have problems with that situation. So it doesn't have to be something negative, like you lost maybe a loved one or a divorce, or I don't know. Your company is just
go to hell, yeah.
Yeah, going to hell. So it can be anything, but that's kind of a response.
Yeah, and for me, I think all those are, no matter what happens in the now, those strategies are born in our childhood as a response to something.
Those are defense mechanisms. So we have two levels, let's say, of a response, right? Of a strategy of coping with the situation. So one level is that very kind of conscious level where we respond to something and we soothe ourselves in the adulthood. Oh, I know that I had a stressful day, so I'm going to maybe have a glass of wine. And that's something consciously I'm doing. And that's one level. But the
yes.
defense mechanisms are this deeper,
subconscious,
subconscious responses to whatever is happening. And that's really rooted in our childhood, as you said.
Exactly, and it's automatically. It can come into play without us being even aware of it.
I think mostly it comes without us being aware.
Exactly.
Unless we have this consciousness in us or presence, where we can say, oh, I just did that, right?
Yeah, because that's the most important thing, that you start to notice your own patterns, become interested and also almost fascinated in your own patterns. And you see actually how they play out and what the consequences are. Because if you don't, you're just on autopilot.
Yeah, I think the first step is to see your coping mechanisms, which are very on the surface. So what am I doing when I'm stressed, when I feel down, when something happened, or when there's something big happening and I'm just freaking out? And how does your body respond to that situation? So do I need to downregulate? Do I need to upregulate? Do I get 10 coffees that day because I really need to feel I'm on top of the situation?
I wouldn't get 10 coffees, though.
People in Sweden.
Sure. I know.
Right?
People are a bit crazy like that.
Yeah.
Then you go all into the sympathetic nervous system. And I mean, that's cool.
Yeah.
but it can be quite hard to down regulate after 10 cups of coffee. It would be for me.
Unless you're used to it. And that's what I saw when I started to work here. And people would drink so many coffees. And I was like, oh my God, my heart would explode. And they were like, oh, that's fine. So anyway, so like when you know what's your pattern, like how you behave in that very moment. So, okay, I need to downregulate. So I scroll social media. I just watch 10,000 videos. Then I feel like soothed. I feel okay. I feel relaxed. Or I don't know. I smoke weed and then it makes me feel relaxed. There are different ways. And when you know that, it's easier also to get access to the other level, which is unconscious.
Yeah, and also to become aware, like if you actually scroll social media, what does that do to your consciousness and to your body?
Yeah.
Because either like you feel relaxed, or actually for me, when I find myself getting stuck and scrolling social media, I become a bit more anxious, and it doesn't do it for me.
Yeah, especially when you think about kids when they scroll.
Yeah.
I see it a lot. So that's like, you kind of get stuck into that mode, and then you're like comparing yourself, especially when you're not grown up, right? So you're comparing yourself to others, getting stressed, your cortisol level goes up, right? So I just feel like it is a way, but it's not good for you. And then you have different coping mechanisms, like they can be good for you or they can be not so good. So not so good is like abusive thoughts, alcohol, drugs, and maybe binge watching TV and you're just sitting there for hours. And well, it's not very good for you. I mean, it's not very healthy to sit there for 10 hours, have 10 beers and just watch TV, right? But there are also like virtuous ways, like meditation, sport, helping others, being of service.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I always think or thought of coping strategies as strategies to avoid feeling. So I'm sitting and feeling into that, because even though they don't have that much, it's not a maladaptive behavior, it can still be a way of not being in the present moment. So I'm feeling into my body, what is it for me and how. So I'm not using a method that used to work, like in my childhood, now, today, here, to like take away emotions or to just numb down, or so it's really about bringing this awareness in the presence to see what works and to be pliable in yourself with these behaviors.
But do you have like examples of like your personal, if you want to share, of course?
Well, one of my strategies would be to hide away. That could be one of my ways of, if I get overwhelmed, it gets too much, I sort of shy away from the social scene and I go into my own cave. And for me, it's important to also then, to go there, it's also where I resource from, through meditation, through rest. But it could be a way of hiding out too much. So I need also to stretch out and say, I want connection. I want to talk to somebody. Because otherwise it's more of a collapse, and then I don't reach out until I'm like done it all by myself. So now I can also ask for help to regulate.
Yeah.
So that might be one.
I can totally relate to that one. Yeah. I kind of tend to do the same thing. So just go to my female cave and just, stay there until I'm better. And that means sometimes like I don't go out to people. Like I might want to work from home more at that time because I need to be alone, figure it out. Okay, it's figured. And then I reach out. Or now that I'm more conscious, I also reach out to friends. I just make very long audios. Sorry. but they accept that. So
yeah, for me, I used to do a lot of workout, like all the time, being active. But I also reflected on that because that could be sort of addictive in the way that I need to have more stimulus. So that if I stimulate myself a lot, like through, training or whatever, then I don't have to feel those subtle emotions, those subtle shifts. And the spiritual journey is also becoming aware of being in contact with your body and the body signals and those deep waves of emotions or just physical sensations, and to be in tune with that.
Yeah, and in fact, if you look at people on social media, for example, there's a lot like, oh, wait, you need to train, you need to train, you need to train. And I'm like thinking, okay, where's this fastness and that? Like, okay, it's good for you to train and do sports. Absolutely. Totally agree with that. But kind of feels like that's a mechanism where you try to escape from the other parts of your life.
Exactly. And only you can answer that.
Yeah.
Because that's what it's all about, to become curious about what's actually going on, what's my actual needs. But if you're just on repeat, you might be repeating a pattern, and in the end, it's detrimental for you.
Yeah.
Because you burn yourself out. Or for me, I did train and I didn't feel into myself. And I ended up getting a sore throat or getting sick or a cold or a flu, because my body was like, enough, I can't do this.
That's it. Basta. Why do we need this mechanism? And yeah.
Why?
But again, no, but but why do we need? Because like I feel like, okay, something nice is happening in your life. You're getting married. Wow, super cool. Like you're happy. You have the woman of your life in front of you, and then there's so much that can kick in, the stress and so on. And then you find those coping mechanisms to try to, because when you think about couples, when they get married and they get a house, I hear the stories that this is the most stressful time of their lives. And I'm thinking, like, should be nice, right? You shouldn't be stressing so much. So what's happening? Is it because you don't know what's going to happen? You don't know, your mind cannot project like, oh, this is what it exactly going to be. This house is going to be exactly like that. And then you're like, oh, I'm safe. But if you think about it like, oh my God, this can happen. This can happen. The house can be like a bad investment.
That's a good question for you to think about. And also, I mean, you can go from just being in your mind. You met your perfect partner, you're getting married, you're getting a house, the dog in a Volvo, and it's all supposed to be so freaking perfect. But then you're getting closer and closer and closer, and that's where your coping mechanisms comes into play.
Right.
Because you see, like, she's not the dream princess that I thought she was. She's got all this bullshit going on. Or she might be angry. It's like, why is she angry? And that might trigger something in you. And it's like, because your partner is just not your mom. And you come to a point, or hopefully, where you can see that you can't seek safety in a relationship. Because many of us come from that space of like, I just want to be safe with you, so we can have it nice, so we can be secure with each other. But then that is no development, then it starts to stagnate. So then you come up towards each other, or you rub up against each other, and you bring up this pain. And then you have to like, okay, how can we relate? Can I be vulnerable? Can I share what's going on inside of me? Or if I could not feel safe with my emotions as a child, I sort of become like this robot. I feel nothing. Everything is okay. And then you sense from me that's not the truth. It's just like I got into shutdown mode and I sort of push you away, and I'm keeping it together. But I'm not letting you in, and I'm not letting anybody else in. And I recognize those patterns from my own life, where I felt bad in a workplace, for example, and I just like tend to shrink my life until it's get teeny tiny, instead of setting boundaries and being vulnerable.
Yeah, exactly. And also very interesting, because you said like maybe one person is going into this robot state, let's say. So it's like kind of pushing away emotions, we're in shutdown and so on. And the other might be on totally opposite side, right? So, and that makes me feel like then the dance, as you like to say, starts, right? Because one person escapes, the other person pushes, and there's a lot of friction there because you just want to get attuned, right? Naturally.
Exactly. And then you end up, as you say, in this push-pull dynamic. Like one person draws away and the other one like starts hunting, and then, the roles shift because that person gets tired of hunting. So then it pulls away and maybe wants to break up, and then the other person starts hunting, and it's a lot of drama. We need to have, to get exposed to this, to get to that maturity, to see, okay, I'm tired of this. I don't want to do this anymore. I want to be myself. I want to be authentic because, it's too painful.
Yeah, it's too painful. You mentioned the robot, but what are the other strategies that you find that are very strong?
So the other polarity of the robot might be overly dependent. Like, I really want you need to be with me here all the time. You can't leave me. I need to feel safe and secure. And instead of actually going for that, we need to build that house, that home inside of us. Mm. So that's a lot of work.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
The cat is again here.
Cat is here.
I think it's he likes podcasts.
Yeah.
Okay, but what about because there's a lot of discussions around narcissism these days. I don't know if you see that, but I scroll my Instagram. It's like narcissistic behavior, narcissist partner, blah, 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 a lot. And I'm just wondering, what about that? Is it a coping strategy as well?
Yeah, I think so. And according to, I think it was Gabor Mate that's talking about it. If as a child you're forced to, take things, and I'm all in it for me. Like the other family members don't really have my best interest at heart. So I need to step in and take care of my own best interest. But that means that there's nobody doing, attunement to me and actually caring for me. And that I haven't learned how to attune to other people. So instead I go into the taking. I just take what I need.
So it's a response to the situation. So when you think narcissistic, there's a big wound there.
Oh yeah, of course. It's all about the wounding.
Mm. Well, what about other ways people behave? Nice, good boy, good girl, that dynamic. That's a lot. I'm thinking in Sweden, for example.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it's
nailed it.
It's a big one here. Yeah, because if that was the way that you could be seen as a child, like you were performing good at tests, and then you're so good, you're so successful, and then you actually get the attention of your parents that you wouldn't get otherwise. It could even go as far as, you getting physically ill or physically sick, because that's what it takes for your parents to actually take care of you.
So it's a trap.
It's a trap.
Don't go there. or check with yourself, do I do that? Because when you're overly nice to everyone, you're trying to be good for this person, that person, you're just giving a lot. So it's the opposite of the narcissist in a way. I think that these two people get easily attracted to each other.
Exactly, because then the person that needs a lot can see the narcissist as strong, and and don't see the red flags in that person until it's too late. And then, the dance has already started and you're paying for the consequences. Mm. So it's about especially becoming aware of your own strategies, coping mechanisms, and then you can start seeing in others. Mm. Because before you do your own inner work and see yourself, it's impossible to see it in others.
Mm, exactly.
Yeah.
But no, so what came to my mind, one of the coping mechanisms I see is the denial. For example, no, he didn't hit me, or he didn't mean to, or he's going to stop drinking, or she, I'm saying it.
Yeah.
Female perspective. But there are different ways like that. It can be very granular. Okay, my coping mechanism is I'm a good girl. And then I go down and it's oh, now I'm using denial, or I'm using another smaller strategy to just, cope with everyday life.
Exactly, because once you start unveiling these things,
Yeah.
Also, it could be like you're going from one coping mechanism to another. Or, for example, I would have a lot of the martyr previously in my life. So in a relationship, I could be like sulking almost, like you don't see me. And then I had to face that. And then I could see behind that, it was like, okay, then I just withdraw. Then I don't get any human or any attention. So how do I do to actually give myself the support so I can come out and actually see you and be seen and feel that fire of like, this is intense. I'm going to get rejected. I'm going to get abandoned. Almost feels like I'm going to die or something. And then to stay in that fire, but be kind to yourself and to the other. And that's a true spiritual work ethic.
Yeah, but I feel like it's so difficult that many people use as a coping strategy here, avoidance. Yeah. So since I've been hurt, I've been in a relationship, and that closed my heart, I'm not going to try even to step into any relationship, so I'm avoiding it. It's like when you had a car accident and you don't want to get into the car. If you don't get into the car after, you healed, you're okay, your legs are not broken and so on, it's very hard also psychologically, I guess.
Yeah, that's often when we experienced a lot of trauma, we need to do it like drip by drip. So slowly, so not to overwhelm the nervous system, so we can feel safe in our own bodies, because otherwise we go into denial or we go into dissociative modes, and then we're not present in our bodies anymore. And then we need to be present in our bodies to be able to do the healing work and bring that compassion and love to these parts. Yeah.
That's really interesting. I'm also thinking about like when we are in a relationship, because many people are probably curious about that part, and we have discussions with our partner and so on. There are some very typical ways people react and, use the strategies. And one is maybe like, like you're projecting, like, oh, you said, you think, you.
Yeah.
So we're projecting that, even if the other person said, I didn't, no, it's you saying that, right?
Yeah.
But I'm wondering what other ways like this shows up in a relationship. So we have this projection, but also like, I don't know, maybe displacement. That would be another one. Like, for example, you come home from work and then super angry at your boss, whatever happened at work, and you just put all of that on your partner.
Yeah.
That's another pattern that I see that happens a lot.
Yeah, and as you can see, if you come with that energy, that's why you need to be attuned to yourself and have that awareness, what you're carrying inside. And if you come from work with all of that anger and you don't deal with it, of course it's got to be projected out to somebody else. You need to find your own strategies of regulating yourself. Maybe you need to like shake or move or scream or run or whatever, but also find ways after that to sort of get the energy out there, but also to stay with the emotions, the residues of the emotions that comes up.
And that's hard to stay with emotion.
Yeah,
people don't want to do that. It's like why people use intellect, like, I'm going for grief, for example, and instead of feeling the emotions, they do the research on how long it lasts. It's like, let's try to make it like feasible and facts. Well, reject the emotional part.
Yeah, and that's what I see. A lot of people are just living in their minds. And if you're living in your mind, you can't really do the healing work because you can't think yourself out of a prison made by thought. And you can't heal yourself and feel yourself from the mind, because all the mind wants is control, basically. It wants to be safe. It wants to control its environment. It wants to get everything in its right place, and then it wants to be done. Okay, how much time does it take to heal? It's like, okay, the more you think about it, the longer it takes, For sure. That's why people are sitting in meditation thinking about meditation or thinking about what they should be or trying to be calm instead of actually just sitting there and seeing what happens in the body mind.
Just experiencing yourself in that moment, or observing your thoughts in a way.
Yeah, and just see what's happening in this whole system of mine. Instead of, I want to get to a place of enlightenment or whatever it's called, Instead it's, okay, this is what's active in me right now. Can I acknowledge it? Can I tune to it? Can I caretake it? Can I be with it?
And that's hard. And that's when many times, and that we spoke about it before the podcast, what happens to me as well, when the humor kicks in. I use it a lot. So it's a coping mechanism. I realize that when I can observe myself, oh, I just joked about it, but it actually hurts me.
Yeah.
And it's not always like you don't use humor all the time just because it hurts you, but I'm just feeling like in some situations, when I gave you an example of a work-related situation where I was continuing to joke about it.
Yeah.
Like, this hurts me deeply, but I'm joking. It's funny. Ha, ha, ha. No. And a great example of a person who lived with that coping mechanism is Robin Williams for me, because I feel like he had so much, like there was a lot of depression, a lot of wounds and pain in his life, that he would always use humor to just, push it away. And drugs, that was another thing at the beginning of his career.
Yeah, and that humor is such a double-edged sword, because one way it could cut through a lot of stuff and it can make us laugh and connect, and it could be beautiful in that way. But then you need to feel from what space am I coming from? What is my intention? Am I using humor instead of actually setting a boundary? Because then, you can hurt yourself and you can hurt others by not showing yourself and saying, hey, stop, this is not working for me. Instead, that could be a way of dodging the pain. So it's, yeah.
It is for sure. And I feel it's one of the trickiest one, because you feel like, it's just, like you make a joke and then you soften the problem in a way. Like you don't get angry, but you're like, you're laughing about it. But actually it's like something that hurts you inside. So I think it's the trickiest one.
So Laura, how did this work out in your childhood?
I don't want to do it now. But I feel that kind of coping mechanism for me, it came later in life, because I had other coping mechanisms before, such as down. I would be doing my focus work. I would just draw some like art stuff, that kind of stuff. I just focus really much on something else and just not feel.
Oh, okay.
But later in life, I started to use humor to just say, another one.
But for me, I always like the joker or the jester. I had it from a young age.
You did it?
Yeah, I did. But what I find fascinating about that is like, the jester always was the only one that could tell the truth to the king. So it's a very powerful archetype in that sense.
Because you can say the truth still.
Yeah.
Through that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense, because I did say the truth.
Yeah, exactly.
Just didn't go well, like with the receiving process.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So
when somebody jokes about something, just analyze it. No, I'm joking. Not every joke is to be analyzed, but it's a coping mechanism. So try to think right now about 3 things that you might use in your daily life to cope with stress and, these situations. So if that helps you, maybe just write it down.
Yes. Notice when you're not telling the truth about your situation or your feelings and what actually is alive inside of you. So write these things down. And what are you afraid of? What are you most afraid of would happen if you told the truth about your experience?
So instead of joking, if you would just say, listen, this hurts me deeply, or this is not how I would like to do it because it's just not my way,
Exactly. Yeah.
And what would that mean? Because I feel in this example, there's a lot of fear of rejection.
Yes. And I mean, in most of our coping strategies, the fear is of rejection, abandonment, and which makes sense. If we're 2 years old and we get abandoned, we won't survive by ourselves. But then we need to reflect upon that and also get in touch with those emotions that triggers that kind of behavior.
And then what's the next step here? Like, okay, you know what your coping strategies are. You wrote it down. You become aware when you're using them, because that's the next level, I guess. Like, okay, I know more or less my coping strategies. Then I start to notice it. Then what happens next?
Yeah, then you actually have to start changing your behavior.
If it's like something that influences your life in a negative way, right? Because
Exactly, yeah.
sometimes it might be that, okay, this serves me. I mean, yes, meditation is my way, or serving others, because then I forget about my problems. And maybe that in that very moment, I want to keep it, because we cannot just throw away everything.
No, and I mean, for all of us, or most of us at least, we come to a point where a behavior doesn't serve us anymore. And it generally has to be so painful that we have to look at it. And then you have to go through the fire of transformation. Like, for example, actually showing up in vulnerability and saying something to your partner. Instead of being the robot that is shutting down, you say, I feel a bit insecure when I heard you say that, or I feel the fear of rejection, or I feel the fear of you abandoning me. And just by being with that, and that fire, and feeling that, but choosing to show up anyways, that's in a way, making the step in where you always stepped out.
Yeah. Like facing it and saying it out loud, then maybe it becomes also smaller in a way, because when we try to bury it, it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, right?
Yeah, because that's, it can finally show that it was just a paper tiger. It wasn't a real tiger. And it's so beautiful, that process, if you, change your behavior and you expose yourself in a way. And it's like the release of the pent-up energy that you've been holding this pattern to feel protected. And then you let go. And it's like sand running through your fingers. And it was nothing. It was just my own fear.
Just in my head.
Yeah, it was just in my head.
And also, this is amazing, but I also feel like it's not enough to do it one time. I mean, it's a good beginning, but you need to make it a habit.
Yeah.
So when I'm in a relationship, I think I learned that for the past year, and I would say, no, this doesn't work for me. Or like I would show up for myself, and I was very proud of that, because, yeah. I said my truth.
Yeah, I mean, you need to basically rewire your brain, because you had these connections, or like this, almost like a railroad going through your brain, and then you have to go on to a different little path. And first it's like this forest path, you almost have to go in with a machete, because it's so dense in there. But gradually, you pave a new path in your brain.
Then it becomes a highway.
Exactly.
And a good one.
And a good one, hopefully. And if it's not, then you have to pave another one. The work never ends, but we can see where we, run into walls and just like, this doesn't work for me anymore. And it might be, that you have an addiction or something like that, and it's just ruining a lot of your relationships. So then you have an opportunity.
Yeah, to get out of that. The first step is to see it. When we can see it, you can feel it.
Yeah.
Right?
So the acceptance and the acknowledgement of this is how it is right now.
Yeah.
Because denial is the first obstacle, It's like, no, everything is fine. I don't have a problem. Okay, so then nothing's going to change. You can't help anybody that's in denial either.
Yeah, and that's a lot of people, at least I met, that would say, no, my childhood was perfect. And I'm thinking, there is no perfect childhood. That sounds a lot like denial. There's something you don't want to admit to yourself or somebody else, because it's too painful.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know if we want to go into fragmentation, but I think that's a very fascinating topic as well.
Go on.
Yeah. It's just like, say that your father leaves you, or, there's a divorce with your child and you lose touch with your father, for example. The one part of you is going to be super self-sufficient and be like, I can take care of myself. I don't need my dad. I'll find my own ways. And that's about that part that's going to show outwards. So people's going to think like you're so self-sufficient and you can strong, you can handle it by yourself. But then another part is going to be, that little girl or little boy that got abandoned by their father and just wanted and craving that connection. So then you have an inner split of two personalities, basically. And that's what they work a lot with in IFS, to connect these two parts of yourself so they can have an inner dialogue. They can see you as an adult and like revisit those parts of yourself. So the energy, the pent-up energy that's held in these parts can be released. So you can come into a more healthy inner dynamic in a way.
Yeah, and also in that process of IFS, you can give inner child the thing that they needed in that very moment. Like you can allow yourself as an adult to send that good energy. Like you needed to feel safe. I'm holding you and I'm embracing you and you giving you the safety. So that's the beauty of this process as well.
Yeah, and then you have to come from this place of self-love and awareness, because then you can also provide that child with the love, with the seeing, the attunement that it needed, or it felt it needed. And often these parts of ourselves are like crammed in very small boxes, or afraid, or in a freeze, or very suspicious of us because we haven't taken care of those parts of ourselves. And that's where we need to step in and be our primary caregiver.
Mm.
Because if I want it from you, or like in a relationship with somebody, that's meant to fail.
But that's how people relate nowadays. Like, I'm going to take from your cup and maybe you're going to fill my cup. And, like that's the dynamic that most of the time shows up, and that just comes from the lack.
Yeah. And what I see with that is like, that's basically vampiric energy. Like, I want to suck your blood. I want to get it from you. So that's where it becomes very important with, where am I coming from? What do I want from this relationship? And can I be truthful about that? Can I tell you about that? And that's vulnerable.
Mm.
Because otherwise it's like, okay, I take this from you and you can take this from me. But then it's a trade agreement. It's transactional. We're doing a transaction here. And I mean, it's fine if you want to live that way. Go ahead. But is that love?
No, it's like people having sex, like we're just having sex. Okay, that's a transaction.
Yeah. And I mean, you live your life the way that you want it. But for me, it's very important to reflect upon this, because, I mean, karma means action, the actions that you take, and from the place that you take those actions, it's going to ripple out into the world and have consequences.
Very. Is there anything else that we would like to still mention that you feel that we didn't cover today?
I think we come to a pretty good spot.
Yeah, karma. Yeah, well, if you want to know more, in the next episode, we're gonna talk a little bit about authenticity.
Yes.
And also about the dynamic of feminine and masculine.
That's gonna be interesting.
It's gonna be very interesting. You're very welcome to subscribe. Hit the button. And yes, hit it. And we hope this helps and gives you a perspective.
Thank you so much for being here with us and listening to this.
Thank you.
Be well. All right.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao.